one of the other things I wanted to talk about was podcasting trends that like you are seeing happening that you're really excited about, or things that you are just kind of focused on right now. I'd love to hear from you in regards to that.
Right. Wow. There's a lot going on. I feel that podcasting is still on an upward trajectory. So a lot of new people are thinking about podcasting and they're starting up their own podcast. But let's say if you have been in podcasting for a little while, I see collaboration being a really key piece for growing your show. And I actually experimented a lot with this over the past year and a half per se. So last year I wrote a book, and instead of doing a book tour, a traditional book tour around the country, I said, you know what, I'm going to do a podcast tour. So I organized my own podcast tour, and my goal was to be on 10 podcasts. And I actually like blew that out the water. I was like on 14 over the summer. So I was able to be a guest on all these different shows that were in alignment with either the book that I had or with my show, which is what I'm talking about and what I'm an expert and really good at. And by the time I got back from my summer break from my podcast, my downloads had increased like tremendously, which means that over the summer, there was a large majority of people who were introduced to me at the first time or had heard from me on other podcasts, and they started listening to my show, went through my archives. And when I had my first episode for my season, it was just like way above what I had ever done before. So for me, I think that collaborating with other podcasters is very, very important. And for me, that's a very big part of my marketing piece. So when I take seasonal breaks, I take a break from producing shows, but I'm also a guest on many, many shows. So now I'm about 60 podcast guests in. And I also have like a spreadsheet. I have a methodology. I have a pitching template. I have it down to a science, so that I know what shows I'm offering value to, and I could really be organized and just make sure that everything is good. So I think podcast touring, collaborating is very, very big. Also, seasonal breaks. I see a lot of shows moving to seasonal breaks because, again, if you are a one-woman show like I am, it is very hard. I also have a full-time job and I do other things. And I still want to have a high-quality show. So I decided that, you know what, 10 to 12 episodes per season is how much I'm going to be able to create, and I'm going to take a break. Mm-hmm. And for me, my breaks look like 2 months in the winter and 4 months in the summer. But you would think that, oh my gosh, she's not producing shows, her audience is going to just disappear. No, because I let them know, hey, I am going to take a break. I'll be back in September. I make sure I show up in September so they know that they could depend on me. And they just know, it's kind of like a TV show. You know that, okay, you're going to take a break, but then when you come back, they're just so, so excited. And there's other ways. Like for me, I'm also really big on getting your listeners off of the app, which I think is pretty hard to do. Mm-hmm. It's pretty hard to do, but really fostering that community offsite of your podcast. So it's like after the podcast, what's the next step? So really, really building out email funnels and like making sure that you're able to communicate with them through email, making sure that they're following you on social media. If you have a Facebook group. So these are all things that I think about and the trends that I see in podcasting over time.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more with you on all of it. One of the things that gets asked a lot is, how do I grow my podcast? I've been talking about it on Instagram and it's not driving numbers. And this is why we have a guest thread in the group. I try to do it weekly or bi-weekly because I'm like, this really is the best way to grow it. And like you said, target your audience, make sure there's a reason for you to be on the show, that it's not just like, you're a travel person talking about, I don't know, I don't have a good example, but something totally irrelevant to travel, right. That there are people there. And I also really appreciate, and again, I think this is one of the reasons I think your podcast is so interesting, because it has the small business side of it. And a lot of people think about monetization only through advertising in their show, which is dependent on your download numbers. Whereas if you bring those people, like you said, into a funnel of an email or onto your social media outside of it, there's an opportunity later to monetize with those people that might not be just a direct sponsorship from some big brand. So those tips are amazing. Again, I hope you guys are taking notes because that's a lot of really good info right there for sure. And I also am moving into seasons, which I never had done prior. And I agree with you. I think it makes it so that you're able to take a pause and really develop some great content rather than just scrambling to be like this never ending project. Which I think can get really overwhelming and can cause burnout in people because there is no end goal. Whereas at least if there's an end goal somewhere, you can really show up for your audience, which is amazing.